Hi, this is Kerry Artak with Wicked Stocks, bringing you a weekly update in Bitcoin. I recorded this video on Tuesday, July 1st, 2025. This is a longer term look, same weekly chart throughout the entire video, but this one stretches back some 7 years. And I could walk you through the sequence here, but I won't spend too much time doing that other than to mention that when we closed above this 5-year channel top this week at 84,572, we did fall back to it back in February, April, the tariff talk. We broke it on an intra-week basis, never closed below it at the end of a week. And so the buy signal that emerged with the November of last year initial settlement above it still remains intact. In other words, still anticipating a 122,433 as a longer term objective, and that remains intact, and 84,572 is still solid long-term support. Now, I don't expect to see this anytime soon, but this is the big picture. Above 84,572, the 122,433 area likely in the coming, well, I can get to that in a moment. We could see an accelerated push with a settlement above a key area that I'll show in a moment. But what I'm going to show here and do right now, of course, is the fact that about two and a half months ago, we settled above this descending channel top that this week is at 96,571. And so rather than, by the end of the year expecting 122,433, it's now more like, well, I've been saying 2 to 3 months now for over 2 months. And so we've been consolidating a lot, obviously, the last couple of months. But 96,571 remains solid pullback support, able to contain selling through the third quarter. And yes, above which 122,433 remains, I'm just going to say, a 2 to 3 month target. That would, and I'm going to jump to this next image here, and there's a lot to say with this image. First and foremost, we've got this descending near-term, kind of a 2.5 month channel structure, the base of which we tested last week, that this week is 98,590. So 98,590 really represents the beginning of a wide zone all the way down to this previously mentioned descending channel top at 96,571. This is almost exactly a 2,000 point range between 96,571 and 98,590 that can absorb selling, as I say, through the third quarter, and above which the 122,433 area remains a 2 to 3 month objective. Now, we have a new descending channel top that we've already come close to testing this week at 109,256, and I like this as a buy signal because it really would be a double buy signal. As you're well aware, we've been pushing through this 109, 192 area for the last, well, couple of months, 3 different weeks to be precise, over the last 2 months, but we've not yet closed above it. And so, yes, closing above 109, 192, this high from January, would be a buy signal, but I also would prefer 109, 256, a little bit higher than 109, 192. If we close this week above 109, 256, I think we could have a protracted 3 to 5 week rally to 122, 433. So we could see this potentially by the end of July, no later than by the end of August, if we were to close this week above 109, 256. Until then, this represents the top of our consolidation process. It's been playing out for the last couple of months, and we could ease back into the upper 90s, 98,590, 96,571 over the next several weeks, perhaps. This is a two-sided 2 to 3 week swing trade that sets up beginning at 98,590 support to buy and selling at 109,256 to sell. And you could trade inside of this zone into later July. Inside of this range is 97,641, which is a downside 3/8 Fibonacci from the May high against the April low. And so there's just a lot going on between 96,571 and 98,590, above which 122,433 likely over the next 2 to 3 months. And if we might close above this descending channel top at 109,256 this week, we should see this possibly within 3 to 5 weeks. I would expect a spike in volatility. The 122,433 area is really part of a range of resistance up to 127,658. So this is your buy signal now as we move through July into early August, closing above this descending channel top at 109,256, the 120s expected. probably by the end of July. 122,433 is the beginning of a range up to 127,658. 127,658 is a more significant resistance area. It is a 1-year channel top that can contain buying through the rest of the year. This would be an area to sell Bitcoin if you're long Bitcoin, and your time horizon is typically a half a year or so, because we could top out at 127,658 and fall back to what would be channel support that is presently in the lower 80s and climbing. So we could top out at 127,658 and fall back within a half a year or so. That would take us probably right around 100,000 or so. So that would be the sequence that I think would be quite possible. But none of this is worth mentioning unless we close above 109,256, because once again, holding below 109,256 will keep, yet again, 96,571 and 98,590 in reach over the next 2 to 3 weeks. A more significant support area than 109,256 is a resistance. In other words, this 96,571 able to contain selling through the third quarter, and above which 122,433 likely within 2 to 3 months. And if we close above 109,256 this week, make that 3 to 5 weeks. Now with the downside, I'm going to finish up here and mention that if we close below 96,571, which is this descending channel top that I actually don't have labeled, but I do have labeled here. So if we close below this channel top at 96,571 that I show representing just as a horizontal line here, if we close below this lowest level in terms of the support, then we've got a good high through the third quarter. Within a couple of months, I would expect 84,572, which is at this stage really the beginning of a wide zone down to 76,411 that can absorb selling through the rest of the year, and from here we can round up again. If we were to close below 76,411 over the next few months, we've got a good high for the year with significant losses anticipated into later year. But that scenario is not even remotely possible at this point in time. We are bullish once again above 84,572 long term, 96,571 midterm, and if we can close above 109,256 near term, which is to say 3 to 5 week push into the long awaited 122,433 to 127,658 area, where a Bitcoin could actually top out through the rest of the year. And I'm going to leave it at that for this week's Bitcoin update. You have a great week.